as a kid, I always wanted this. And it's easier than you think. Hey, what's up? I'm Fids. I really like Batman the Animated Series. So much that I have a shirt. And I'm not wearing it just because of the video. I'm coincidentally wearing it because it's an awesome shirt. And one of the things that I really wanted to get my hands on was the grapple gun. And I thought, you know what? This is going to be a perfect challenge for me to do. In today's video, we are going to be making the Batman Animated Series grapple gun. We're also going to give it a really cool paint job to make it feel like it's been used. I really don't want it to feel like it's a prop out of a packet. I want it to feel different. This is really going to challenge me with my skills in not just 3D printing, but it's also going to allow me to really work on refining what the outcomes look like so it looks really cool. Let's get straight into it. Now, the first thing we need is an STL file. This is the type of file we print on our Bamboo Labs P1S 3D printer. And listen, there's a bunch of different sites out there. There's a bunch of different files, but the one that I found that I really liked was from a designer called Nuada Designs. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. It's on Thingiverse. And if you want this for yourself, go ahead, jump in the description, and I've left the link for you. Now, the file itself comes in a bunch of different objects. There's the buttons, there's the actual main body, there's the handle, there's the ammo, there's a bunch of different stuff. But we need to get started, so let's get this 3D printer going. Once the print was finished, I needed to make sure that I touched it up. A constant issue you're gonna run into with 3D printing is there's only so much ironing and refining you can do, at least in my limited experience. Ironing is important in being able to create a smooth and untextured finish on the top. You can use the print bed to apply texture, but the problem is I can't make every side of this print fit on the bed. It's just physically impossible. So the next thing I needed to do was sand it down. I took the components of the print into the garage and I started to use 60 grit sandpaper. This was purely to knock out the layer lines. Once that was done, I used a fine sanding block. This just helped blur the lines and also added a wear texture. Once the sanding's all done, we need to start painting. What I did do, and this really wasn't necessary, was I actually sprayed it with primer. Now, the reason why you would normally do this is to help the paint adhere to the object, but the paint I was using was from a company called White Knight, and they make a range called Squirts. It's specifically for plastics, and it's actually a primer and paint, so this step really wasn't required. Once I had the body painted, I then needed to work on the ammo. Now, for the ammo, I did need to prime it, and I did start to layer coats of the Dual Luxe Chrome Finish paint. It was fantastic. I just used some light coats to really give it that touch. In between coats, what I did was I did actually sand down. Now you can see that there's layer lines there as well, but the reason behind the sanding wasn't to knock out all of the layer lines. It was to add texture to the paint. I wanted the paint to almost look like a brushed steel finish. With the sanding and base painting out of the way, this is where the magic starts to happen. The body and the handle went together perfectly, so the next step was actually to start the aging process. I pulled out my silicone mat and laid down a couple blobs of the 3 main paints I'm going to be using in this process. These are all acrylic paints. I've used just a flat black, I used a raw umber, and I also have a silver. And this right here is the secret weapon for success. When we start dry brushing, the way that the technique works is really simple. You dab your paintbrush into the paint and you're trying to basically get paint to the very base of the brush. You're rubbing excess off and then you're using the brush to get deep into the nooks and crannies, but the paint becomes like inconsistent and it gives it a very natural wear. But I use a technique that I don't know the name of. It's just something I started doing specifically in the Ash boomstick build, and I've been doing it ever since. Basically what I do is I get paint on the brush and I apply it to the little corners and areas that become highlights. And the purpose for this is I use that to then elongate on high wear areas. These areas right here are elevated. They're gonna have the most bangs and knocks and nicks of all of this build. So I need to make sure it looks right. By using this silver, there's almost like a small metallic flake that's in there. And this, along with being applied over a flat black, allows it to look like it's painted steel that's rubbed off. It's the easiest way that I can think of it. And just look at that. That looks awesome. I mean, great. Came out perfect. The next process was to prep the ammo and to prep the buttons, and I used black for this as opposed to silver. It then makes it look banged up and knocked around and whatnot, and also dulls the silver out, which allows it to not look so shiny and out of the box, which is absolutely what I'm trying to avoid. The next detail was applying that same black to the buttons. Now, all I wanted to do was I wanted to make it look like it had grease and gunk and grime on it, and that's really all that went to that part. Now, to allow the buttons to feel like they would actually work, I needed to put in a spring. There is a little cylindrical space inside, and I just literally put down some super glue, I put in a spring, and then I put the button right on top. Once that was all attached, the next thing that I did was applied that same dry brushing technique to the button plates, and that just gave it that sort of completed look and made it feel like it was done and dusted. I'm really happy with how this came out. The print time for all of the components was just under 8.5 hours, so not a massive amount of time. I do have to say, there is some parts that I didn't like. The first thing was when I was printing this, I had basically the body and the handle printed down on the bed. And the issue with that was I had an amazing side and I had a not so amazing side. And it actually ended up requiring me to redo the print because the not so amazing side was unsalvageable. I didn't think it looked good at all. I didn't think it was really worth my energy and attention in trying to fix. Now, I did actually end up printing it on the opening side, down on the print bed for the body, and for the handle I printed it base plate down this way, so it was a lot easier. I was able to get some texture on the bottom, and that's kind of what I wanted anyways. That takes me into the parts that I did like, which was I got to add a lot of extra detail and sanding, and the extra bangs and detail that you get, not just from the paint in adding highlights, but the texture from the sanding and also the contrast in colors really makes this feel like it jumped off the screen. Now, the tough part about this is trying to think about how I'm going to display it, because I've got not just this, but I've also got the ammo parts that go with it. I've got a couple of them here, and I don't know whether or not I should make a holder for it or just leave it like that. Let me know your thoughts. Jump in the comments below. Okay, guys, that right there is gonna do it for today's video. Batman the Animated Series Grapple Gun. Absolute success. But until I see you next time, make sure you're looking after yourself. Take care. Be safe. All right. Peace.